After much contemplation, I have decided to return to Final Fantasy XIV. So I've played a ton of Final Fantasy XIV in the past, started burning out late in the Heavensward expansion and pretty much quit after finishing the Stormblood base story. So I'm going to have some catching up to do, but having lots of story and content to do is pretty exciting for me. And speaking of the story, I hear so much from so many different sources about how good the storytelling of Shadowbringers is. That's the latest expansion, so I'm really looking forward to experiencing it myself. Let's just take a moment to rewind time. So I used to play Dragoon. I kind of started in the original 1.0 Final Fantasy XIV, but I very quickly quit after being really disappointed, especially with the offering of classes available at the time. After a few patches it got pretty good with the addition of classic Final Fantasy jobs like Dragoon, and trial fights with the summons Ifrit and Garuda. If you played the original FF14 for 3 months, you got a permanent legacy bonus to your account with a few perks and a cheaper subscription. It was worth playing the original FF14 just to get that cheaper subscription fee. Come A Realm Reborn, the game had a massive reform, and I managed to form a big guild with friends. We raided the Primals and the Coils of Bahamut. There was loads of banter and it was epic. I can still remember clearing Bahamut for the first time.
Yes! It's over, it's finally over.
The next expansion, Heavensward, was good, but our raid team was getting a bit fatigued, and there were a few changes to how raiding worked. I kind of loved A Realm Reborn raiding because there was just one difficulty, well apart from that one savage experiment Square Enix abandoned. Having a second, easier difficulty that can be done through the Dungeon Finder felt like it undermined our efforts and rewards, not to mention we were partially redoing the same content. Only the Bahamut's Coil Raiders got to discover the truth and full story of A Realm Reborn, making it an extra awesome guild experience. It just wasn't the same in Heavensward. That's enough of me being a negative Nancy. Our original raid team fizzled out and then came Stormblood, where I pretty much quit after completing the main story. Back to the present. Dragoon is awesome and I've had a good time with it, but I've already decided that I'm going to swap to Black Mage. I think I'm a bit fatigued of playing up close melee characters in MMOs, and I'm just looking to keep some distance, sit back and blow some stuff up. I'll have to do some catching up and level up my Black Mage first, before stepping foot into Shadowbringers. So, what made me think of returning to FF14? I'm a bit bored. I hear loads about how good Shadowbringers is. I'm not so burnt out anymore. Or Endwalker, the new expansion coming this November, looks good. Pick your answers. To be honest, it was a mixture of all these things. My goal is to get ready for the new Endwalker expansion pack and share some of my experiences along the way. So I've actually made a start and resubbed. I'm still only on Stormblood as I'll need to get my Black Mage to level 70. It's currently level 60, so I've got a bit of experience with it. Logging in, I'm really happy to see our guild or free company still going, and our estate still rocking. It's gone through a bit of a reform, but I'm reunited with some friends. Sadly, I've lost my own personal house, as you lose it if you're offline for 3 months. So the leveling commenced, starting with a few dungeon or raid roulettes, which put you into a group of random players, and you do random dungeons or raids with them with a massive XP reward. I'm doing the Black Mage story quest along the way, which involves a lot of travelling to the city of Uldar. Just visiting this place at night filled me with nostalgia. It's the music at night, it's one of my favourite pieces. It brings me right back to playing in the beta, and the early days of A Realm Reborn, where I was recruiting new guild members at this very spot. It's day 2, I'm making steady progress and starting to plan the most efficient way to level 70, and the most efficient way just ends up being running all the different roulettes. You get a pretty big bonus the first time you do them each day, and I've started mixing in a bit of PvP too. Final Fantasy XIV isn't well known for its PvP, but I find it decent. I was really surprised how Black Mage plays in PvP. My fire, ice and thunder magic have become instant cast since the last time I played, which makes Black Mage a hell of a lot more mobile and more fun to play. Mass crowd controlling large groups of enemy players to sleep is really satisfying too, and can make a massive difference to the outcome of the battle. I'm doing the Praetorium, a really awesome A Realm Reborn scenario, and some random high level guy starts being a dick and posting big Shadowbringers spoilers in the party chat. That kinda pissed me off, but I prevailed. Got to say, the Black Mage rotations are harder than I remember, especially when you unlock Blizzard and Fire 4. You'll see I'm really sloppy with the rotation in the footage. It really doesn't help that every dungeon or raid is a completely different level. You get levels synced down to the dungeon's level and lose access to some of your spells, so my spell rotation was completely different every dungeon. It was a bit confusing at first. I mix in a few be-spent daily quests and hunt a few bills in between dungeons too. I'm getting better at my spell rotation, but I can imagine a lot of players who buy level boosts will have a lot of trouble playing their class efficiently because they'll be skipping out on all the practice. But I had a new problem. I kept getting distracted by the gold saucer. It's got some new rewards for me to win. If you don't know, it's a pretty awesome amusement park filled with rewarding minigames. You can play the triple triad card game, chocobo racing, jumping puzzles, pet battles, and loads more. When I managed to peel myself away from the gold saucer, the grinds continued, and I got to re-experience all sorts of dungeons, raids, and trials. I eventually got my Black Mage finally back up to level 70. I then did the Stormblood extended story quests that were added in the patches. I watched a quick Stormblood recap video just to get refreshed, and started the patch story content. There seems to be a lot less dungeons or trials connected to the Stormblood extended story. I think there was even only one trial. Gimlet Dark was my favourite dungeon. It's a giant battlefield and the first two bosses had some interesting and new mechanics. The first boss was an Iron Man who telegraphed the direction of his continuously moving attacks with arrows. And then we had Prometheus from Final Fantasy VI. It would dig underground and then blast through the walls surrounding the arena, which looked pretty awesome. I found the Burns was a pretty decent dungeon too. The White Sands or Ash made for a pretty unique visual experience. Throughout these dungeons I get some Black Mage rotation practice in, and I'm finally getting the hang of it. But something I don't remember in the game was these vehicle fights, where you drive or take control of major characters for certain fights or moments. I know in other MMOs I've played, people really struggle controlling vehicles, to the point vehicles stop being added to the game, which always perplexed me a bit because it literally takes a few seconds just to read what your 4 abilities do. I didn't mind the vehicle fights in Stormblood, there weren't too many, and the characters weren't too difficult to understand. Alpha Nord is such a scrub, he only has 4 spells on his bar.
Yeah!
I got to return to a few Stormblood zones, and I've got to say I think Axiom Steppes is the best zone visually. It's a really simple zone of flat green lands that reminds me of Final Fantasy X's Calm Lands, or maybe a little bit like Warcraft's Nagrand, if you've played that. It's rare when you can take in an entire zone visually at once, well at least on foot. Most zones these days have really complicated landscapes that block your view. It's difficult to speak about the story without massive spoilers, but getting into it there's a few small spoilers next you might want to skip if you haven't done the story yet. But one point that was probably my favourite was the parley between our United Nations and the Garlean Empire's beefy leader, Varys. This villain just goes around the table and destroys everyone verbally, making them out to be hypocrites and pointing out their weaknesses. And then, during a brief intermission, you get to speak to our leaders and make choices that will influence what they'll say next. Pretty cool. I really liked the Shadowhunter character. I picked up pretty quick that it was Gaius from A Realm Reborn just from his gunblade. He was an awesome villain, but he was presumed dead about 5 years ago, with our epic A Realm Reborn finale. I'm really hopeful that he has big parts in the Shadowbringers story. Overall, the Stormblood extended story was good. It has a slow build-up, but that's a trend throughout FF14. It takes its time to develop the characters and plot, while the larger threats become the focus later down the line. But it's definitely worth sticking through the slower moments. I haven't gone too in-depth as I hope to do with Shadowbringers, mostly because this was just catching up on extended Stormblood patch story content. Of course, there's a lot more Stormblood patch content I haven't done or unlocked yet, new dungeons, raids, trial fights. I'll have to come back and do this side content in the future. I'm curious about the Ivalice raid based on Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy XII. And I see some of the Chinese gods, Sirayu, Suzaku, Bayako, which are some of the new trial fights. I especially want to experience these. They were big bosses in Final Fantasy XI Sky, so there's a bit of nostalgia there for me. That's me caught up now and ready for Shadowbringers. It's exciting that there's a whole new expansion I haven't touched yet. I'll update soon with my new experiences, but for now, peace.